I decided one day, you know what? I'm going to get drunk. And I had never been drunk in my life. I'd never taken a drink of alcohol in my life because I had always been afraid of becoming what I was scared of. And I started drinking. And at first it was fun. And I'm going to tell you this, people are like, sin's no fun. You're a liar. You didn't do it right, because it's really fun for a little while. Just a little while, and then all of a sudden, it comes due. And I started drinking every day. I would go to work drunk. I would get drunk as soon as I got off of work. I hated my life so much I didn't want to live it. I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want anything to do with it. And I did every single thing I could do to escape it. But at the same time, I was so angry at God. I was so mad at God that I was going to do everything I had ever been told was sinful. I was going to do those things. I was going to do those things because I wanted to hurt God. And in the process of it, I hurt my family, I hurt my wife, I hurt everybody around me, I hurt friends, I did it all. Because I was so consumed with pride. And I'm just telling you, that's what it was. It was pride of why me? Why me? I deserve better. I deserve better. And I was so angry. And I tell you, so a lot of people, when we very first got into ministry, it was kind of old school still. Some of you that grew up in Assembly's of God know what I mean. It was kind of old school still. And I have a lot of people in church come up to me now and they're like, I love your tattoo. And it's a big one. I would show it to you. It goes way up. They're like, I love your tattoo. But they don't know that behind that tattoo I was told that was sin. And I hated God, and I was going to do everything that was sinful. So I got a big tattoo, so that I could permanently tell everybody how much I hated God. And now I wear it every day. Every day. And people look at it now because now it's the thing to do. But when I was a kid, it wasn't the thing to do. And I was going to do everything I could to hurt God. I was going to do everything I could to break that relationship with God. And now all of a sudden I had become, what the problem was is at one point I was that Pharisee standing in that room, looking at that woman, saying, you don't deserve to be here. And now all of a sudden, what have I done? I've created this reputation for myself. I have become her. I have become her in every sense of the word. I was more messed up than probably any guy you'll ever meet. I was doing things in front of my wife that are shameful and embarrassing. I have gotten in fights in the parking lot of gas stations in front of my kids. Shameful, horrible things. But I was doing them out of pride and rebellion because I was an idiot. And I wanted my way. I wanted what I wanted. Sin and shame is going to keep us from pride, from God's presence. Our pride is going to keep us from God's presence. A lot of times we're going to say, I don't measure up. How can he use me? Why would he love me? Why would he want to use somebody like me? And we're going to stay out of God's presence because of the shame and the guilt of the past of our life that we've lived. We're going to let that wreck everything that God sees in front of us. We're going to let those things that we hold over our own heads keep us from the remarkable and amazing things that God's got out there in front of us. Going on in this scripture, starting in verse 40, it says, Jesus answered him, Simon, hold on, am I in the, yep, I'm in the right place. Sorry. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them loved him more? And Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly. You know, obviously, Jesus tells this story and he says, which one loves him more? I mean, obviously, duh. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this one out. It is. It's the guy who's got the bigger debt that's been forgiven. You know, Jesus is asking this guy this question, and he easily answers it, and he can look at it because he's looking at it from the eyes of himself. He's saying this is a no-brainer. Why even ask a question? There are so many out there, though, who are going to... Here's the reason he's asking the question. There are people out there who put value still on what they can do. Jesus is trying to get across to him that the value here that is being assigned by the one who's forgiving the debt. But other people are still looking at their life and they're saying, I can dig my way out of this. I can fix this. I can solve this problem. I can handle it. And that's that pride still speaking. That's that pride still standing in the way of what God's got for you. That's that pride still keeping you from the remarkable and amazing things that God's got in store. But you're saying, I can do it. I don't need God because I can do it. Just let me do it. But the person who is having their debt forgiven, that's the value that's being assigned, because the guy forgiving it is saying, you are worth me wiping this clean. You are worth me taking care of this. You are worth me getting around this. You know, the wages of sin is death. Romans 3:23 tell us that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I don't think I could go around this room and ask, I mean, I could, but I don't think anybody would give me the answer of, no, I'm perfect. But if I went around and I asked every single one of you, have you ever sinned? Have you ever sinned? Have you ever made a mistake? Have you ever, turned left when you should have turned right? Men, have you ever listened to yourself when you should have listened to your wife? We've all at some point made those mistakes. We have all at some point done those things that have all of a sudden put that gap between us and God. And we're looking at that and we're saying, how can I ever be in God's presence? And when we get in his presence, we're just like that woman. And we're saying, God, I don't deserve to be in front. I'm going to stand behind you because I don't deserve to even be in front of you. I don't deserve for your eyes to be on me. I don't deserve for you to take a look at who I am. Every single one of us have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. That's our value. That is our worth. That is who you are. It's already determined. That is the person that you are. You're just like this woman, a sinner, and there are people around you who are going to say you don't deserve to be in the presence of God. Shame may even be covering up your life rather than God being able to speak to you. All you can feel is that shame, that desperation, that fear, that everything that walks hand in hand with that. Those things are standing as obstacles of you being in the presence of God, and you're going to hide behind rather than come in front of him so that you're not exposed to him. What is our debt? What is it that we owe? As we read, as we just read earlier, the wage that we are owed because of our life is death. It is physical death. It is spiritual death. So maybe that's right when people say I have no value. Because the only thing I've ever earned for myself through my actions is death. 7 years I put my family through a living hell, through torment and pain and suffering, so that I could chase whatever I wanted in my pride. And at the end of that, I look at the sum of all of those actions and I say, what is this worth? And it has no value. I find myself still gaining the inescapable wage of death. It is the one that I've been given. It is the one that I am owed. I've tried, and yet I am still only able to be known by my reputation, by what I have done. The devil, I'm telling you, he is constantly in my ear. Every day I wake up, the devil is there trying to tell me, you are nothing. You're a drunk. You're a quitter. You are an angry man. You live in fear. You have doubts. You're inadequate as a father and as a husband. You are a victim of your own life. You have caused your family nothing but trouble. You are greedy. These are all things at one point or another I have heard in my ears. I've even said to myself, and I said, how can I have value? No matter how hard I try to escape from those voices in my head, the devil throws them back into my face every day, trying to remind me of what I've done, trying to tell me of the things that I've done, trying to drown out the voice of God saying something else. But in verse number 44, we're going to read to the end of this story. It says, then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house, and you did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say amongst themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. There's a huge component to this story that just literally jumps off of the pages to me when I read this. I want you to picture, I want you in your mind's eye, I want you to picture this whole scenario going down, okay? Jesus is in this room. He's talking to these men. He's teaching, and he's having an interaction with all of these men. And there's this woman behind him who has been kissing his feet, who has been crying and wiping her tears and on his feet. All of this is going on, and Jesus is telling stories to this guy. While this is happening behind him, Jesus is talking to this guy. It never says that these things stop. Matter of fact, Jesus says from the moment she's come in here, she hasn't stopped. This is all going on. And then Jesus does something. And it's so cool. I want you to see this in your mind. I want you to see this. Jesus does not tell the woman, come around here, I want to talk to you. Okay? He doesn't say, lady, would you come out here? I want to talk to you about something real quick. I want to use you as an object lesson. He doesn't do that. He doesn't keep her behind him and talk to her. Jesus turns his attention. Jesus turns his focus from these people who are condemning her. Jesus takes his focus from that crowd to that woman. Jesus turns around. Jesus takes himself and puts himself in the position to have an interaction with this woman. You want to know something? There's a lot of us in this room who are standing here saying, I'm not worthy to bring myself into God's presence. I'm not worthy to get myself in front of God. Don't worry about it, because Jesus has done everything that he can to get himself to you. Jesus has done everything that he can to get his focus from this world and this crowd to have it on you. We don't have to worry about, God, what can I do to get in your presence? We don't have to worry about, God, have I paid enough tithes? God, have I done enough good deeds? God, have I done enough right actions? Have I measured up? Am I good enough to be in your presence? Because Jesus went through everything that he went through on that cross. Jesus broke all of those chains and those traditions and those lies that had been keeping people on the outside of God's presence. Jesus went through all of that to focus his eyes on you. Jesus had a purpose when he came to this earth. He told us, I have come to seek and to save that which was lost. What was more lost than that woman? What was more lost than that broken woman who saw nothing but her shame, who saw nothing but her guilt, who saw nothing but every mistake that she had ever made, who saw nothing but every lie she had ever been told about herself, who saw nothing but every little thing that she had done that had separated her from God. And now this woman has the full attention of God. Jesus, the Son of God, Jesus, God in flesh, standing in that room, said, I'll talk to you fellas later. I need to talk to this lady right now. He put his focus on that lost, broken, hurting woman. Y'all, Jesus is in the business of coming to your life at your most broken and finding you. Jesus is in the business of that. If Jesus could find me in my mess, in my stupidity, in my self-destruction, Jesus can find you. Y'all, Jesus is in that business, and he hasn't changed it. It hasn't changed in 2,000 years. That is who he is. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7 says that people look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Every man in that room, every person in that room could only see what was on the outside of that woman. Every person in that room could only see the mistakes and the failures. But Jesus saw way past that. And he saw to the very heart of who this woman was. God sees your heart. He sees past your appearance, beyond your reputation, beyond your actions of your old life, and he sees the heart of the man and woman that is sitting in your seat. A friend once told me, and this is something that has stood with me. This is something that has hung with me. When I very first started this turnaround in my life, I struggled with value. I struggled with my self-esteem. I struggled with, am I good enough? Do I measure up? And a friend once told me this, and you can steal this, I don't care, because I straight ripped it off of him. But a friend told me, when I would get down on myself, that you are somebody that Jesus died for, and that ought to count for something. Y'all, when everybody else puts their value on you, when they put that price tag on you, you are somebody that Jesus died for. That ought to count for something. When you're struggling in your heart, when you're struggling in your head, when you're fighting every battle that you fought over and over and over, and you're saying, I don't measure up, you are somebody that Jesus died for. Man, when I hear that, it just turns my thinking around. Think about that. Jesus saw beyond all that you would ever do. He saw your true value. He saw your true worth. And yet still, so many times we diminish his love and recognition by devaluing ourselves. Yes, I am a sinner. I just am. And yes, I'm a lot of times more wretched than I want to be. And I come up way shorter than I want to. But I'm telling you, that does not stop the work that Jesus did for me. That does not stop what he did on that cross. Romans 5:8 says this, man, this is one of my favorites. If this is not on your top 10 Bible verses list, it needs to get there. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to give you the highlights. It says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Man, I can't preach that any better than it was written. You hear what I'm saying here? You hear what he's saying here? You didn't have to do things to earn it. You didn't have to work your way into the place that you measured up. While you were still sinners, Christ died for us. While you were at your worst, Jesus died for you. While you were still making mistakes, Jesus died for you. While I was in a bottle for 7 years, being not physically, I never did hit anybody, but being emotionally and psychologically abusive to my family, Jesus died for me. Jesus saw that messed up guy, that broken, hurting shell of a person, and he said, you can't earn this, man. That's the remarkable thing about who God is. That is the remarkable thing about the grace of Jesus Christ. And that is the remarkable thing about who you are, is that he sees more than you do. He sees more than you do. He knew every worldly value that I would ever have. He knew I was a sinner. He knew I was imperfect. He knew that troubles are going to come my way in my life and that I was going to doubt him every second of that 7 years. He knew I would deny him. He knew I would turn to alcohol and a life lived for myself. He knew I would not always fulfill the godly role of a husband and a father. He knew I would hate him. He knew I would hate myself. He knew I would let anger rule my actions. He knew all of these horrible things that I see in myself and want to assign as my value. And he knew that others would hurt me in my life as a kid and cause me to question my own worth. He knew all of this, and he said, Jake is somebody to die for. Just put your name in there. Put your name in there. While you fill in the blank, was still a sinner, Jesus died for you. Man, if that doesn't help your self-esteem, I don't know what will. If that does not help your value that you see in yourself, I don't know what will. He loved you so much that he didn't make you earn it. But he said, I'm going to do this because I love you. With all of the stains of the world all over me, with all of the stains of the world all over you, he looked at you and he said, you're somebody worth dying for. You're somebody worth dying for. We're going to get ready to close this out. And I just got a couple of stories I want to tell you. But I just want you to start thinking and preparing your heart for what God's going to do tonight. Because I know there's people in this room who are struggling with how they view themselves. And God sees something better there. God sees something bigger there. You know, we look back in history and there's a lot of amazing characters that we're going to read about in history. A lot of amazing people. And one of those is a guy named Alexander the Great. And now this is not, I think this is probably more legend than it is historical fact. But I just think it's a cool story. But Alexander the Great was conquering the known world. He was going from city to city, conquering them, state to state. He was just making himself known. He was doing all he could to spread Greek culture around the world. But he comes up to this city named Phrygia. And they had this king at one point named Gordius, he had come into town. There had been this prophecy made that said, the guy that comes into town on an ox cart is going to be king. And this fella just so happens to come in. It's probably just dumb luck, but this guy comes into town and they make him king, and he ties his ox cart up outside at this pillar, and he never gets in it again. Just leaves it there. Well, this oracle makes this prophecy that whoever unties this knot, and it was this intricate knot and all of this over time, all of these vines had grown up in there, and it couldn't be done. It was just an impossible task. And the oracle prophesies, whoever can untie this knot will be ruler of all of Asia. And so Alexander comes and he conquers this city, and They make him, he is now their king, and he sees this, and they explain the whole situation with the cart and the knot and all of that, and they say, this is the prophecy. So whoever can untie this is going to be king. And he sits down and he starts working on the knot, and he can't get it. He can't get it. And finally, he gets to the point where he says, well, one way or the other, this knot's coming undone. And he pulls his sword out and he cuts the vines in half and undoes the knot. There are a lot of us in this room up against the obstacles of life, and the devil is telling you, if you can't undo this, you'll never get to what God wants for you. If you can't fix all this mess, you're never going to be the person that God sees. You're never going to be a good husband. You're never going to be a good father. You're never going to be somebody that people respect. You're never going to be that because of all this mess. And I'm telling you that the Word who became flesh has cut every single knot in your life. God did not have to untie those things. God did not have to fix those things. God did it in one fell swoop. When Jesus went to that cross, everything that devalued you, he wiped away. Everything that said who you should be was gone. If that is not a remarkable thing in my life, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. Jesus did that for me, and he did that for you. When I was at my lowest, when I was at the absolute worst point in my life, I loaded up one day. We had gotten into this huge fight, this huge blowout fight, and I loaded up and I was like, I'm out of here. I am done. And I wasn't done with living with her. I wasn't done with living in the town or the home we were living in. I was done with life. And I packed up my gun and I drove to a place that I knew was way out in the middle of nowhere, and I had decided that that was going to be the end, that I was finished with life. The devil repeatedly, and he told it to me so many times I believed it. The devil repeatedly told me they would be better off without you. I don't know if any of you have ever thought that or heard that, but that is a lie. That is a lie the devil uses, and he uses it all the time. He places on you so little value that he gets you believing it. And I was convinced my family would be better off if I were not in the picture. That my kids would be better, that my wife would be better, that she could find a better husband, my kids could find a better dad. I was convinced of this. And so I drove out there, and I get the gun, and I put it up under my chin, and my stupid cell phone rang. And I say stupid, it was God. And it just so happened to be my very best friend at the time that I had not spoken to in a long time. And he just called to shoot the breeze. I mean, there was nothing profound about this conversation. Nothing amazing. I can't tell you that when I walked away from this conversation, that he had spoken these great, I can't tell you what we talked about. It was literally just a conversation about life. And I drove home. I had hit rock bottom in my life, in my value. I did not want to be around anymore. I didn't want to be a part of things anymore. I saw so little value in Jake that I didn't even think that it would be a blip on anybody's radar if I was gone. I just wanted to hurt myself and get it over with. And Jesus saw so much value in me that he told a friend that I had not spoken to in quite some time, just call him and shoot the breeze. You can't tell me that wasn't God. I was literally a second away from it. You can't tell me it wasn't. Jesus went through everything for you. And he's still doing it. Still. Jesus still saw enough value in me that he stopped that from happening. He still saw enough value in my wife and my kids that he stopped that from happening. Now, I had a choice to make still. I could have gone through with it. I could have hung the phone up and said that was nice and gone through with it. But something in that conversation got me thinking, this is not the thing to do. And it was I will tell you, from that moment to this was a long road. A long road. I was just telling your pastor this afternoon, I can't point to a definitive moment in my life where it was just 90-degree turnaround. Or 180. Yeah, that's 180. I can't tell you because it didn't happen. It was like turning an aircraft carrier. It took me a long time to stop going one direction and get going the other. And there was a lot of times my wife would see forward progress and then backwards progress. She would see a couple steps forward and then a few steps backwards. But I am telling you that what God starts moving, if you stay on board with him, the devil can't turn that around. Amen. He can't. It might take years to get you going where you need to get going, but the devil can't turn that around. Jesus has started something in your life. Jesus is doing something in your life that the devil wants to put a stop to right now. But I am telling you, through the thick and the thin, the hard and the easy, if you will stick with God, I can tell you this because I'm living this, that Jesus has got something for you. He has got something for you. You do measure up. You do have value. You do matter. Because if you didn't, Jesus would have sat back and watched this whole thing burn up. But instead, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Don't ever devalue something that God loves. You are somebody that God loves. That deserves something. You are somebody Jesus died for. That deserves something. Don't ever devalue what God has put value on. If you'd close your eyes this morning or this evening,